I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:06. All right, roll call. Amber Fellows. Grant Tillman. Mark Arthur.
Present.
Roderick Johnson.
Present.
Jen Eastridge.
Present.
Amanda Smith.
Present.
Jack Lark.
Present.
Brian Foley. Annie Somerville.
Present.
With 7 present, there is a quorum. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now is the time for public comments. If you wish to make comments, we'll start with those in person. You'll have 3 minutes to address the committee. Go grab this. All right. I apologize, I can't read the first name. It looks like it's ROO. So whoever signed this first. Okay, well then we'll go with George Hagenauer.
Anybody here? Thank you for taking on this really difficult task. In many ways, I'm glad that I didn't make the committee. In 2014, the city held a meeting to get responses to various uses for Tacony North Park as defined by the city planning department. In 2016, the railroad tracks were closed at Groven Park. However, there was no review of how that affected the property or its uses. At no point has there been any real discussion in the broader community of what was the best use of the property. Even today, the local dialogue has been focused on the city's proposal and not on what are all the potentials from the site. The city benefits process really provides a unique opportunity to look at all the potentials of the site, as well as pretty much reviewing the most important one currently, which is the housing on the site, whether it meets the real goals of what the city has set. This is especially important because there may be 2.5 million available to implement whatever is done there. Currently, most of it goes to cover site costs, including a developer purchasing the property, greatly reducing the risk of the project to the developer, though also reducing the cost per unit. Currently, you might not be able to review the project because what is being proposed to the Planning Commission seems to be quite different than what we saw on March 7th. As such, I would suggest you spend your time seeing if the overall strategy meets the goal of the project to provide lower cost housing, but also looking at other partial or complete uses of the property. The city process to date has created a lot of distrust within the surrounding community. You can improve on that by using a dialogue approach to clarify questions and concerns. Listen carefully, but also question those of us who speak whenever we are allowed to. Through a grassroots community planning process, the community has come up with a series of questions and issues. We divide our questions, which are on the next 2 pages, into 2 categories. The first are issues that can be addressed before a site plan is released. 2 other site options are number 8, and those can also be partial, not complete. The second are issues specific to the site as used for housing as proposed. If we get a list of topics before each meeting, we can in many cases provide more detailed information at the beginning of the meeting, providing we know what the site's going to look at. Finally, someone in the city has interpreted the challenges caused by having Locust Street be the entry point to the property as a call to expand Locust Street, stating that Locust Street needs to be widened. Nobody locally wants Locust Street widened. I don't think it's even possible given the fact that the street in some cases is right next to the sidewalk. Okay, it would involve removing people's lawns, moving power lines. It's not a good idea. So that's basically the summary that I have that's come out of the community. And the following 2 pages have most of that. I would suggest that as you look at costing, that the interior buildings, what's in the center of the site, is most affected by the site problems and also are the most expensive. If you think about it, building out when you're right on the street is relatively not very costly. Most of the site preparation costs are going to run through the center of the property, building a street, laying in sewers, adding electricity. So if you're looking at where you need to get money from, I would suggest that you look at density and look at the center
That's time.
Thanks a lot.
Are any other individuals attending in person? If they would like to make comment to the committee, please raise your hand. Seeing no hands raised in person, if anyone attending virtually would like to make comment, please raise your hand to indicate that. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next section of the agenda. Following this, the election of the committee chair, I'll pass the meeting over to that individual to move on to the remaining parts of the agenda. So I will entertain a nomination for chair. If the committee would like, if each person would like to indicate if they would like to be chair, you could raise your hand and then present why you think you should be chair.
I don't necessarily want to be chair. I just want to, well, I'll just nominate myself because I just want to bring in Dr. Lynette.
Good question. Is this meeting run by Robert's rules?
Yes,
And are you doing that or is the chair doing that?
the chair will govern the meeting, but until a chair is elected, I'm running the meeting.
I'm going to be interested in why the diversity chair. We need 2 minutes to think about it. Can we just relax for over for a second just to discuss this? I think there's probably confusion because a lot of people haven't been a part of a body like this before.
If you could please speak in the microphone so that those.
I just wanted to bring up, so there's another CBO process for Clark Park, and you know, they have kind of worked out a lot of the issues of process. And so it might be helpful for us to not reinvent the wheel, maybe follow their guidance, because we had a lot of the discussion about like, do they even want to have a chair or how they want to do this? So I don't know if other people have been watching those CBO meetings, but and want to bring some of that information. But from my impression, they did go with electing a chair and a vice chair, but they decided on a very loose process for facilitation. So basically like the most easygoing version of Robert's Rules where there is free dialogue until it seems like there's some amount of consensus. And then they move back to more formal Robert's Rules to actually vote on decisions. So I just wanted to bring that information into here that a chair would merely be a facilitator, and maybe if we wanted to follow the lead of the other body, it would be a very loose facilitation that would just allow for open dialogue.
Thanks, Amber. Yeah, in that case, I'm interested in the role of the chair or the vice chair. I'm passionate about this project and excited to learn more also just about the process of how this works. And I think that taking on that leadership would be part of that.
So I will mention that the majority of the advisory bodies in the city don't strictly adhere to Robert's Rules. So it's whatever this committee is comfortable with. It doesn't necessarily matter to staff, assuming that a effective and efficient conversation can occur. But it is helpful to have someone that can chair the meeting and at least direct conversation.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you, Mark, for sharing that. I would not want to chair. One other thing about the facilitation that they're doing, and correct me if I'm wrong, staff, because I haven't seen the last couple meetings, but the other CBO meeting has been using this tool called Fist of Five, which is just a way to kind of gauge the temperature of conversation to see if everyone's basically ready to vote. So that there isn't the more formal Robert's Rules process, but once people are kind of ready to vote, then we shift back to Robert's Rules. And Fist of Five just means that if you are on board with where everyone is at, you showing a lot of support is 5, showing pretty confident scores 4, kind of in between 3, less supportive 2, so on. And then if you are completely against it, a fist means you block and want the conversation to keep going. So that's what they've been doing as far as I know.
So it started that way. So sorry, Andrew and I have been in every meeting. So they started that way, and then they realized that the freewheeling conversation was actually better for them. So when they're ranking things, they will kind of mark through their hands. But I would say the fist of 5, and we were talking about going into committee of the whole and having a bunch of motions, and instead they just decided relax Robert's rules, have the conversations, have a freewheeling conversation with staff, the developer, and the whole committee. And then they actually, have they even made a motion outside of really approving the minutes?
Just the agenda and minutes.
Yeah, we haven't even made an official motion yet. A lot of this will be discussion. And I think it's worked really well. And I think everyone on the committee is pretty happy with the way it's gone so far. Assuming you've heard from them at least, so.
Well, no, I went to the last couple meetings, but that sounds good to me. I support that.
I'm not sure support for the idea of it being relatively loose, and appreciation for the fact that Amber has been through this process from the creation of the CBO and has been watching and paying attention to what's happening at the other meeting, at least to some extent. So I would sure support for that self-nomination.
I did hear the last part.
The last part of what I said?
Yes.
I think, so Joe Myers, which is explaining how the other CBO group has been operating, which is even looser than what I originally thought. That they're not making motions really, they're just approving the agenda and having free discussion amongst each other and with the developer. And that sounds good to me. It seems like there's been support. So it would mean just like having a formal chair, but to have open dialogue.
I read something online that said that they already had a list of benefits. But now I hear that no motions have been made, so this is just something that's been proposed that they haven't actually voted on yet. Is that the case then?
Yeah, so their last meeting is on the 21st, and at that meeting they will vote on their proposed benefits, and then once those are approved, the attorney's office will develop that into an agreement to send over to the developers attorneys, and then eventually going to council. So really, it's just they're getting a consensus on how highly each member ranks the individual benefits, and then they're moving to the final meeting to vote on those benefits. But it has been mostly just a conversation and really just gathering information from that developer. And then at the last meeting last night, they prioritized quite a few benefits for final approval at the next meeting.
But we've learned through the last process that each site is going to be very, very specific on the different benefits. So the benefits that would be for, for one, the incentives can only pay for certain things. And so, a pilot is completely different than a brownfield TIF request. And so, and each site is so very specific that it's the needs and what, like at the other site, there's actual community space. And so it's how to program the community space. Whereas there's not a community center as part of this. So every site is just drastically different. And so that's why we're discussing the proposed, the meeting that we had on the 7th, the benefits from that. So it's going to be a lot different than what they have, but that's why it's going to take a while to actually formulate those benefits.
And if you look at the back of your agenda, it does have the proposed benefits that were discussed during the March 7th meeting.
And that was very similar to what they did, not this list, but very similar to have a list of things to discuss and then rank.
Okay, great.
Is anybody else interested in being chair?
I don't think I'm interested in being chair because this is my first time in a setting like this, and I don't know that I'd be comfortable, but I would be happy to be a vice chair or a helper in another way. My commitment to this project is that I would like to see this through in a equitable and kind way. I think that I'm excited to get to know the people around this table and to see what we can accomplish together and see if we can come to good common ground with the developer and the city to move a project forward that could potentially benefit all of us.
So can we make a motion to
Well, I believe
nominate?
Amber and Mark have both self-nominated, and you only require a nomination. You don't need a second per Robert's rules. So if both of you still wish to seek that seat, we can vote now. Or if one of you wanted to retract your nomination, I know Amber said you weren't necessarily interested in serving chair, but if you would like to, we can move forward with the vote.
What would you like to do, Mark? You said.
I mean, I'm also agree, like if it's gonna be a very casual environment.
Rock, paper, scissors, there you go.
Or you could be co-chairs.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that idea.
That's a great idea. Co-chairs to change it up.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Okay, we do need someone to run the meeting. You can alternate, that's fine by me.
Rotate each meeting, one meeting you chair, one meeting you chair. Okay.
Ooh, like just changing it up a bit. I
Who
like
starts though? So we can turn the gavel over
Let's
immediately.
go with Mark since I think he said it first and then Amber next meeting.
Okay, so I'll just because it makes me feel good, if you could all, if that's what you want, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, there's gonna be co-chairs of Amber Fellows and Mark.
We have to use this often. Just kidding.
But the record will read in the minutes who actually is the chair of that meeting. Just to be on the safe side.
Co-chairs, so
Co-chairs,
it's not actually necessary.
Okay.
This is just a quick logistical question. If for some reason both Amber and Mark are absent, what happens?
It will be a similar situation as this. If both are absent, I'll start the meeting and immediately ask for nominations for a temporary chair and then vote on that.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
So that takes us to B, adoption of the committee meeting schedule.
So what we've realized based on the ordinance is we have to send out a notice to the surrounding area of when these meetings will be. And so we cannot have our first meeting for at least a week after Monday. So the first meeting we could have possibly would be on the 18th. Now, to meet in this room, we have a lot of meetings planned through April and May. Oh, it's just a 14 meeting list. So as long as we keep out of these, we can do it. One thing, and I'm just bringing this up because we've learned it. It's better to kind of figure out how many meetings we want to have through this process and then hone in the dates from there. It's made the last CBO meeting much easier to figure out how many meetings we think it will take to get us through this within the, I think now 50 days.
They had 4, right?
Yeah, 4, not including the first meeting.
Okay. So this wouldn't count and then 4 after this.
That's what they did.
Okay, I think 4 seems reasonable. Is anybody opposed to 4?
The only thought I think when the CBO was being configured, there was thought to maybe even be a 2-meeting process, which is maybe very little. I'm definitely not opposed to 4. I'm wondering if we might want to select 5 days just in case, like it goes over, but not necessarily use the 5th date or the 4th date if we can complete it in 3 dates.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Okay, so 3 like official days and then 2 as like in case we need them. I think that's good.
So what the other committee did was they selected the schedule and then they selected a process and how to cancel those meetings. Either the chair or 3 members of the committee were able to cancel those. So I would assume we could just say both the co-chairs cancel it together.
Okay.
But it might be difficult to get 5 meetings in 40 days.
Okay, so looking at the calendar, the earliest we could have a meeting is the 18th. What days are available that week in the evening?
Let me pull my calendar.
Here, Andrew, and you go through that. I'm gonna set that, I'm gonna figure out the last date we can meet based on the ordinance right now.
I do know that the 20th is planning commission, which will have 220 North Park on the site.
So 3rd.
I think that's valuable information for us. So I would suggest if we could do the 21st or next week.
21st, we cannot.
Okay.
So here is standing meetings. We cannot have one on the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd Monday. Tuesdays do not work at all. Wednesdays, we cannot have on the 3rd and 4th of the month, and Thursdays on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. So our days are limited.
Monday, April 25th.
So yes, we could have a meeting on Monday, April 25th.
That works.
Is everyone available on that day?
6 o'clock?
Is everyone comfortable with a 6 p.m. start time? Okay,
What about the first? Sorry, can we just say that one more time? Monday, April 25th at 6 o'clock. Perfect, thank you. What about the following week?
Second,
Yep.
no. That is the Monday prior to the special election, and no one can come in here.
What about the 4th? And 5th and 4th and 5th?
Let's see. So the 4th could work.
All right, is everyone available on the 4th of May, Star Wars Day? I know there are lots of important things to do.
No, hold on. Is that, no, that's good. It's a Wednesday.
Does 6 p.m. on May 4th work?
Yes.
Yes.
Everyone?
Yes.
What about the next week?
the 11th.
Wednesday, no, that
Does
is,
the Monday work?
The 4th is not Wednesday.
Seems like Mondays are pretty.
Mondays are, hold on, Monday, that's 2nd.
Second Monday.
No. So we could do that Wednesday, May 11th.
The 11th? Great. Should we look for the 4th and 5th? Should we just try to pick 2 days in the same week since they're kind of like alternative meetings?
Or do we know that last day of the 40 day?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's the 20th.
Okay, so I think we're gonna have to put 2 meetings that last week. I will not be in town on the 11th, so. Just let me know, as long as there are other people that. I think you'll still be able to tune in virtually if you want to give comment, but you just won't be able to.
I would.
So I'm wondering
I'll get you for my.
if we have one on the 11th and we have 2 scheduled for that last week before the 20th, would that work for everybody to try to cram 2 in the last week?
So the last week, the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th are all taken.
Okay, can we use an alternative location? Or do we need a double,
Let's
the
see.
week prior?
Okay. Yes, you can.
Does the 12th bad for everyone?
April 12th?
May 12th.
May
Was there
12th.
any other
is-
April days before the 25th that were open, or is that?
The 25th is as soon as we can get the public noticing out.
Oh, okay.
And then there's only 3 other days.
And Thursday, May 12th is a taken day.
Who's there?
I can't remember. I think it's arts.
Can we have this meeting somewhere else?
So the problem that we've had in having this meeting in another place, I think we all can say that the Bright House was a very substandard location, especially to have the virtual mixed with the
Okay.
in-person. And so
Okay.
we are looking for another place where we're trying to do the senior center. The problem with the senior center is they haven't been open for public meetings. And there has to be a lot of rules when we do public meetings. So we could try to rent a space at like back office studio, perhaps.
The library, I've been meeting there with the non-motorized committee. It's not for everyone here at the table, but beyond that, there's not really room for the public, I guess.
Can anybody meet on a Monday during the day?
We can't actually by ordinance. It has to start after 6 o'clock.
Does it have to be weekdays?
Well, I mean, this ordinance is no longer in effect. And so we are following the ordinance to the best of our ability. But if that works, if like during the day meeting could work for this group, and if this group felt that that was essential, because I do think it's better to have meeting that week.
Why don't we make the 2 alternative dates during the day of the last week? Just, the only day that would work for me would be the 16th.
Could we do May 5th? So we'd have one on the 4th and the 5th?
I can't do that.
Okay.
So I just wanted to clarify, the alternative meetings, are the purpose of them in case we don't meet quorum, or is the purpose of them in case we don't, if we need more time? If we need more time, I don't think that I want to be in 3 2-hour meetings during the week, if possible.
Maybe we're just trying for a 4th day at this point. Yeah.
What was the
I
third
agree
one?
with
I
you.
just. No, what was the third
If
day?
we're not
I wrote
following
the
the
exact same
ordinance
date.
completely, I mean, maybe we can go into the next week, 23rd of May.
I could do 6 o'clock.
That was me. 11th.
Do we have the 23rd available?
23rd is 4th Monday. We do.
So the 11th, that says.
Is the 23rd of May available or the 25th?
Yeah, that's where the May 23rd is available.
May 23rd.
That was true.
So,
Just in case we don't finish up.
and it's
So-
10:30 and 5th.
So just to be clear, in talking to the developer, there's a few times where they are gonna have to attend virtual, which has worked really well for the other meetings, just to let you know in advance. We try to have the developer here for every meeting, but there are some scheduling conflicts based on other things going on, so.
And the 25th is already taken.
So the 23rd.
Yeah, so that gives us 4 dates. And then
I would say the 23rd is not gonna be done.
23rd is good.
I can just name all the ones that we've done so far, just to repeat, so. Starting. Thank you, April 25th at 6 p.m. Wednesday, May 4th at 6 p.m. Wednesday, May 11th at 6 p.m. And Monday, May 23rd at 6 p.m. as the 4th, and potentially we won't meet, but we'll, there is a possibility.
So the other group, have they had their 4th meeting already?
no, that's the 21st of April.
Okay. Does it feel like they're ready to make their,
Yes.
what did you, after like did you think by their third meeting they were, or?
I would say that it's taken a while to figure out how to craft everything. I think once, like the last meeting, I feel like they were almost ready to vote on it. But I think they wanted to, they ranked, they kind of wanted to sleep on it and actually go to the fourth meeting. I think it just depends on how, I mean, unfortunately, how in the weeds everyone gets on a specific topic, and that happens, and it's meant to happen with this process, but I would say that 4 was plenty.
Now, is this committee looking to put a time limit on meetings? Are you looking at 6 to 8, or you just want to keep it open-ended?
I think 2 hours is fine. I think after that, people get.
We've seen that they wanted to keep it to 2 hours, and every meeting they're extending at least 4 times.
Okay. I mean, option to extend is good, but intention to keep the 2 hours is good too.
Yeah, I agree. I just,
So,
I don't want people to get after 2 hours, so.
I'm aware.
My extensions are fine, but as long as discussion's productive, still in the chairs agree to cut it off when it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be up to you too. Okay.
so,
So do we just do like a motion to extend?
yeah, there would be a motion to extend with a second and then a voice vote following. So this is, the schedule is something that will need a vote to approve. So,
All right, so all in favor of the adoption of the schedule, going to repeat it?
Well.
it's not.
Yeah, I should make a motion to just say I move to adopt.
I move to adopt the committee meeting schedule.
Second. And then.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It's really hard to get me to allow the chairs to make a motion for me.
Cool.
So now we are at C, discussion of proposed community benefits with developer.
Can I chime in one quick thing? So one thing about this meeting is when you request staff for items. So what I have come up with is the PUD application and the brownfield request. And I can get that all out to you first thing in the morning. Is there anything else that this committee would like to see prior to your next meeting?
Is there a traffic study done or being done?
Yep. Sorry.
No, there is not a traffic study complete yet.
Well, when it's complete, I think that would be helpful to see.
Did the city do a sewer survey recently too? That might be useful.
Not at this time. Are you talking about like sewer capacity?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the reason why we're not, we work with our water and utility authority frequently. Our water and sewer authority was built to handle 3 different automotive plants, and now there's only 1. And so there's much more capacity than is needed. So there's never a concern with the capacity that any development that we could do in the city, period, would actually put a strain on the system.
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
There's a engineering study goes in there that goes with the site plan, so that we can see that.
The full engineering has not been completed. The PUD engineering has, that will be part of the PUD application.
All right, just to follow up, is there a sense of when the traffic study will be done?
I think we're waiting to get, I mean, that's a significant investment. We're waiting to get through this process to make sure there's no changes to the requests.
Thank you.
I have a question. When the last ad hoc committee met for the first time, did they just run through all the comments from the first public engagement meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what we're doing, and then we can add extra as we go.
Correct. You can add, remove, it depends on how you want to handle it. What they did is they kind of took the comments at their first, like they went through in the first meeting. And then at their first official meeting, they went through and kind of put each comment into a bucket. Like, is this a community benefit? Is this a neighborhood benefit? Or is this a citywide benefit?
Okay.
And then they kind of divvy it up. I think that's what they're going.
Suggestion. Can you get like a big like post-it thing to write on?
100%.
Okay, I think that's helpful. We can stick them up on the wall.
I have them.
We do too.
I operate on post-it notes, so.
As far as like other informational reports, I imagine maybe some will come up later too. So I don't know if I'm ready to be like, this is everything I would want to see, but one thing I did, because I was reviewing the last or the March 7th meeting was, it seems like there was this hybrid fund as part of the cost, which was that either 2.5 million was going to come from us or brownfield TIF. Like it was either going to be proposed with brown or partial from us and partial from the brownfield application. So I'm just wondering if like the brownfield application is in process and like what's going on with that.
Yeah, so as far as the brownfield request, that it has to be approved by the city before it can be reviewed. It can be reviewed at the county. It can't be approved at the county until the city signs off on it. And so I think what you're talking about is it's now, it's a little bit more, it's 2.7 brownfield request based on the latest engineering numbers, and then a $2.5 million gap in the funding, which the developer and the city are seeking those sources right now through state or county funds. And so there's not an additional 2.5 million, there's not a 2.7 brownfield and a 2.5 million gap, both coming from the city. One will be coming from other sources. The brownfield is the one city requesting incentive.
The brownfield is the one.
Is the one.
Incentive. Oh, the 2.7.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, because that would be going to the brownfield development authority over the course of its payback. And what's the year, like the number of years it's going to
So I believe it depends on if the state will approve it. It's either 10 or 14 years. And those are all, I'm speaking in very general terms right now because it all kind of depends on a lot of things, but those are the rough estimates at this point. Numbers 2.7. It could be 10 or 14.
Yeah, so that's the real figure we're working with as far as like the community benefits process is. And, you know, I just to share what I understand of brownfield TIFs is that, yeah, over the course, so basically the city will not be receiving taxes on the property for those 10 to 14 years, and the payback of the loan goes to the brownfield authority, which is the county body. And that's how they have money to loan out to other developments in the future. But so that's the major public request is no taxes for that period of time.
Well, so just to clarify a little bit, it's not all taxes. So any bond that the city has does not go to the brownfield TIF. So the city will be collecting some revenues on the development, but not all the revenues. The majority of the revenues will go to the brownfield, and then it gets reimbursed for an eligible expense. So it doesn't go to the county, they lend it out elsewhere. It goes to the county and it reimburses for only eligible expenses as put in 381. It's a state act. So there's very few things that a brownfield authority can reimburse for, and it's just those things within the legislation.
But it wouldn't necessarily go back to our,
It goes directly to the development.
so it doesn't go back to the city of Ypsilanti though after that period, right? Like they can lend out money to other parts of the county.
No, so once the TIF is paid off, all the money comes back to the city, then collects all the revenue. It doesn't just stay at the county forever.
Yeah, they'll draw taxes after that period is done.
Correct.
I mean, so like the Thompson block is on a 30-year TIF.
Yes.
And it's like, I think after 18 years, then some taxes come back to us.
A very little bit of the taxes come back to us right now. actually, there was a 5% that comes back to the city. But there was also 3 other layered incentives that made that one a 30-year, and we try not to do 30-year on anything because that's way longer than we would like to see.
Right.
The preservation of that building was very important to the city. So they chose to adopt the 30-year on that one, but this one is vastly shorter.
Sorry, that's my last question about this, but for now, can you explain the bond things? So I don't know. So you're saying that on bonds, we're getting some,
Okay, so there's the Water Street bond where we're paying debt. The school millages, bonds, those are things where when there's a debt that the city's collecting that we are getting millages for to pay, those are not eligible to be collected by brownfields, a TIF. And so the city still receives tax, the city will still receive the tax revenue on this development for the bonds to be paid. And then usually there's a portion of the school taxes that go, but the schools are still made whole in full regardless of anything. So this doesn't take away from the school taxes. It just, there are ways of handling that. So it's not all of the taxes. It is a sizable portion of the taxes to help pay for the infrastructure and the contamination. So,
I was just saying, I have a piece of data I was interested in knowing from the developer, which maybe not today, or if you want to come back to that, but the information on the R rating and weatherization of the homes.
We can get you all the specs. We haven't finalized that till we get through historic. We are fairly close to net zero right now, but we haven't finalized all of that till we get through PUD
Yeah.
and finalize obviously all of the terms with the city.
I guess I'm bringing it up now as to an answer to the question of is there anything else we might want before the next meeting?
yeah, so we might not have all of that. We might not have all of it, but what I'm saying is this is the next meeting. Now, to go back to something that Amber had indicated before, this is not the last time to ask staff for info. You can ask staff for info at any point. You can just email me directly. I think most, if not all of you know, I'm pretty responsive, and I'll make sure you all have my contact prior to this. But any question you have, I will get to you as soon as I can, unless I don't have it. But the goal is this board is not to be, and the staff is to not be a closed book. The goal is to get you anything that you possibly need. And for instance, for one of the members of the committee had some really questions. They weren't quite grasping some of the tables that were coming out. So having coffee with them early next week to make sure that she does understand what we're trying to get. So I'm willing to sit down with any of you. I'm willing to talk to any of you, get you any information you have. There's not a closed book here.
And I just wanted to follow up with some clarity on the process. You know, number one, the site design first and going through PUD is an important process to understand what the lot configuration, the engineering and the infrastructure. When we get the final feedback from planning and begin that, we'll quickly move. And the second step from there is making sure that we meet all the requirements from the historic district. We have already determined the historic specifications for the exteriors and windows, which are a major proponent there to meet qualifications. Quickly from there, site design will be completed with full specifications and values on the energy efficiency. But those processes need to be confirmed before we finalize everything.
One of the questions that George had was harsh plating, and there was an incident there some decades ago. And the question was, is there a plan in place since that they're so close to March plating that would go into effect at that point? Is that on the books? It's just a question that doesn't have an answer now. But
Yeah, so the city does not have any sort of a marsh plating evacuation plan for anywhere in the city. So that's more of a regional conversation to have. We have not been told of any issues, and we've heard the same thing that you just said, that there was a release decades ago. But the city, that would be something we would work through with the fire department to make sure that is done. But we don't require it in any of our ordinances to have any sort of a marsh planning evacuation.
Before moving further, Joe said email, which made me think that since this is a public body, you're subject to the Open Meetings Act, so all deliberation must be done at the table in an open session. So do not have a conversation over email. You would be personally liable for that and subject to a $500 fine. So try to keep all conversation about this process at this table.
And
Is that for one-on-one conversations or?
anything you do in email is very sensitive and can be FOIA'd. I would recommend if you want to email the board, email Andrew or myself or both, and then we will forward it out to make sure there is no deliberation. That's always the key is, and that's why the clerk is sitting at this meeting and he's there. You cannot email together. A lot of boards get in trouble that way.
So is there a number of us that are allowed to talk about this at all together without?
This is where we have our lawyer,
Three of us.
Mr. Barr, can you address that?
Yes, would you please restate the question?
How many of us are allowed to meet separately or discuss the things that were this process outside of this meeting room?
Okay, I'll give you some rough examples or some rough guidelines. But always keep in mind that the Open Meetings Act is so the public can know what's happening in government. And it's to avoid closed meetings, smoke-filled rooms where decisions are made where the public isn't involved in it. So with that in mind, my first rule would be don't do business by email. You can, if you want, you could say we'd like to have a meeting on the 2nd. You could send that to the city clerk, and then the city clerk could decide whether or not to do that. If you have a meeting that's going to be adjourned or canceled, same thing, you would communicate with the city clerk, and then the city clerk would make that decision and send out a broadside to all of the members. If you want to discuss the business of the committee with another member, there's nothing that says you can't get on the telephone on a one-to-one call and discuss it. Also, there's nothing that says you can't on a one-to-one email send one committee member something. However, when you do that, you start getting into the dangerous situation where you may have more than a quorum or more than several members communicating and deliberating an issue. And so you have to be very careful about that. What if you go to a restaurant and you see some other members and you sit down and you have a drink or something? Well, that's okay if it's not a ploy to avoid the Open Meetings Act. The best thing is to do it on a one-to-one member or maybe 1-to-2. Does that answer your question?
I guess, the question is more directly like, what is exactly that threshold? Because I have a deep appreciation for the Open Meeting Act. I have live broadcasted the school board meetings for years because I believe public participation is important and transparency as well. However, like when you brought up somebody asked to sit down for coffee, I'm like, I want to go to that coffee. Am I allowed to go to that coffee? How many of us could be at that coffee? Or
Yeah.
if I run into a few of you at a restaurant, could we discuss a little bit anything that is on our mind? Or is there a certain number of us that we have to say, okay, we have to shut that down completely?
I cannot give you a precise answer, but I can tell you what the court is thinking about. Is this just a chance meeting or is it some ploy to avoid the Open Meetings Act? So if you go to a coffee hour, we still have the Constitution. Yes, you can do that. You cannot, however, make it a ploy to get together with several of your other members, especially not a quorum, and discuss committee business. The idea is the public has the right to see when you're discussing it in public at an open meeting.
Thank you.
What about conversations we would have with just people in the community who are not part of this committee? Is that allowed or is that a problem?
That's permitted. Anyone outside of this committee, you can talk about this all day with them, but it's just this committee doing business outside of an open session.
Best practice is suggesting that you, let's say, if you're sending an email, to have them not.
Yeah,
Your comments copied onto somebody else.
I would say if you wanted to share something with the committee, then either email it to Joe or myself, and then we can forward it to the entire committee. And then that information can be discussed at the next meeting. But no deliberation via email. And you can be in a social scenario, but it also could pique someone's suspicion and then they could file a suit. So it's always best just to err on the side of caution. Your terms of office expires at the beginning of July, and then you can talk about this all you want.
And it sounds like, a lot of people here definitely respect and uphold the spirit of trying to minimize any deliberation, but I just want to be very clear as far as if someone filed a suit, it's only holds water is prosecutable if it's quorum is discussing this or deliberating. Is that correct? Like that's the limiting factor. If it's less than a quorum, then it's not illegal. I know it's not preferred, it's not good, it doesn't look good. I'm not saying that should happen. I just wanted to.
All right, let me give you a guideline. Quorum is absolutely forbidden. If it's less than a quorum, the court's going to look at the intention. And again, if the court decides that this is just a ploy to avoid the Open Meetings Act, then you're still in hot water. The case the cases out there involve, well, people say, well, we won't have a quorum, but we will round robin it. And we'll have members come in and out, or we'll go around the table virtually. No, if you're trying to discuss it and come to a conclusion or discuss the business, and it's not one-on-one, then that's very dangerous.
Yeah, I'll just add, recently, we were given a memo and had a conversation, like as council, and we were told that we had a few subcommittees that we were working on, and we all had that kind of thing, I suppose. But there were just three of us working on like one issue, so. That was a few months ago, I can't remember exactly which month, but
It was November.
yeah, because we stopped the whole.
Sorry to just derail the discussion, but I just wanted to make sure that was known.
Thank you.
I'm trying to keep it one-on-one.
Could Zach also mentioned, I had a question. We're still talking, I think, about documents. Are notes or minutes being taken, and will those be sent to folks after the meeting, or?
Minutes are required by the Open Meetings Act. Action minutes are posted usually the day following the meeting. So those will be up on the city website probably by 10 o'clock tomorrow. And then the regular minutes will be approved at the next meeting. And then those will be posted the next day for public consumption.
Great, thank you. Well, let's see. I mean, I would love to hear ideas about maybe how to have this conversation. I was thinking about, Annie, what you were saying about like sort of like you were saying this, that there were like sort of sub areas we could talk about, maybe like if we wanted to think about maybe organizing the conversation between like community benefits, housing affordability benefits, environmental benefit, I don't know, like, or if we want to just dive in and have a conversation.
I think maybe it was Joe that mentioned different categories. Is that what the other ad hoc committee is doing?
Yeah, we can actually share with you what the other committee has done. And like I said, all of that was handled at at the first real meeting, like this is kind of our organizational meeting, the first real meeting, I'm saying real in quotes.
Okay.
And sometimes the chair can kind of, I think the chair actually did put together the actual framework of that, and then things have been added and subtracted from there. I think it's worked really, really well. And then there were some things they realized that the committee wanted to see based on what the community's input was for the meeting, some things that they didn't want to see. And then they kind of went back and forth on that. And so that's, there's certain things in here as far as widening Locust Street, that's never been a conversation that's ever happened at the staff level, I'm assuming at the developer level. That's something that's never been a discussion, right? And so that might not be something, because the neighborhood seems like they don't want that to happen. That's never been a discussion. So that's one thing where this committee might not want to prioritize that ahead of time. And then what we've tried to figure out is, all right, where does that come from? How does that get paid for? Because, and realize, like I kind of indicated before, a brownfield TIF is only for eligible expenses. And it's not like this developer will own, like developers opened the books and said, this is how much they will be making off this whole entire development. So it's not $2.5 million by any means. And so there's not a whole bunch of area, like there's areas where we could take the brownfield TIF if it's an eligible expense to pay for it, right? And move that around a little bit, but there's certain things that can be paid for and certain things that can't, depending on where the funding's coming from. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, it'd be good to get way more details on that at some point. I'm wondering as far as like, structuring conversation for this meeting. I haven't heard from everyone, so I think it might be nice to hear maybe where people are coming from or things that you care about as far as benefits or your intention. I think it'd be good to hear from the developer too, because this is a kind of a separate process from everything else. So what's the developer's intention with this process? That's just what my idea, but I like the idea of also like the buckets and categories and that as well. I'm just also curious where, because I don't know many of you, so.
Right. I think that's a great idea. Yeah. I'm gonna start over here and then go this way.
Do you want me to introduce myself?
Well, I'm thinking.
At least you're gonna-
Yeah, sure. Yes, let's start with that.
Rod, I live in Grove, so we're only a block from this development, so my passion lies there. I can say there was one event since I've been living there that changed the nature of the city and that of our neighborhood, and that's when the railroad came through and they closed up Grove and Park. Before then, Grove especially, more so than Park, was almost like a raceway. Those cars would cut through from Michigan Avenue to get up across or back and forth. They didn't pay attention to the stop signs or anything. So after that happened, it was a remarkable change because we had less trash on our sidewalks. And slow traffic, it became a walkable neighborhood. And that today it is one of the better walkable neighborhoods in the entire city. We have people coming in there with their dogs and their families and everything like that. So this operation or this development here will, we think about double the amount of people in the neighborhood. So we can talk about how, is that good or bad or whatever, but doubling is definitely changing. You have to accept that. So the question I have is what benefits we might accrue to protect ourselves, because there's community benefits, there's neighborhood benefits, and then there's benefits for the people exactly in that development. So there's a lot of things that they'll need and things like that. I look at this list here and I say that's a nice start, but we'll have to talk about the list. There's some other things on that list. Somebody mentioned at the last meeting, the path to Depot Town, maybe there's a walkway we can do there, something to talk about. There's a homeowners association. How will that work? Can we protect ourselves by having only owner occupied houses there? traffic study has been mentioned. Tree removal, I think we need to protect their trees here, and somebody's gotta be assigned that to look to make sure that we don't cut down too many trees. We have to document the affordability and how that's gonna work. And then my neighbor George has a few others here, and you all have those questions that he had. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm more conservative than the rest of you, but I'm, we're gonna be a direct recipient of whatever changes go on in that neighborhood. Quite mindful of that.
Hey everyone, my name is Mark Arthur. It's going on 6 years now that I've lived in Ypsilanti. I moved here with my husband from New York, and we first were living in this really wild rental above, sort of above Sidetrack when we first moved here. We really fell in love with Ypsilanti, with Depot Town, with the area, and at the start of the pandemic, moved to a house on Cross Street near Grove Street, so in proximity to the development. As someone who came from a very dense urban place like New York City and really struggled with quality of life and just paying rent and the insanity that is New York, I feel really lucky to have found a place like Ypsi and to be able to afford to live here. And that is something that's really important to me about this project, is affordability and how to make sure that the development is affordable also in the long term. I know, from my own experience, as a renter in New York, for example, that those laws are super important and can really affect how long something stays affordable. I love to bike, I love to walk, I love to do those kinds of things. So urban planning and thinking about safety, pedestrian safety and walkability is another thing that is really important to me and that I'm excited to discuss also in relationship to this development. Yeah, I think that's my general for now. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jen Eastridge and I live in Ward 2. I live in College Heights. And I am not only a resident of the city of Ypsi, but I am a business owner here in Ypsilanti. I have lived here collectively between my two tours, my first tour of Ypsi, and then when I came back 13 years. I fell in love with Ypsi big time when I first came here in 2005, and I had never been any place like it. It became really clear to me that Ypsilanti cultivated a culture of creativity and inclusion. And that was really important to me. My background is in the arts. I live here with my wife and our daughter, and I own 3 businesses here in town and 2 shops right here downtown. And I have amazing people, and one of my goals when I decided to specifically come back to Ypsilanti, when I sold and donated everything and moved into my friend's basement apartment and said, I'm going to buy a home here and I'm going to invest in Ypsilanti because I believe in it wholeheartedly. And I did just that. One of my goals with opening a business was not only to contribute to the vitality of Ypsi, but through the community members and through the people who live here. And I believe in Ypsi residents. There's a real vivaciousness and I just heard the right word yesterday. I was like, that's it. And now of course it's not there. That's what I'm trying to find it, right? But anyway, I have amazing people and I wanted to hire people that live in Ypsilanti and who are raising families in Ypsilanti. And I wanted to be able to pay people enough to try to make a living wage and be part of downtown and be a part of the town in general, and the community, and the neighborhoods. So this is important to me, not only as an Ypsi resident who believes in Ypsi so much, but I also really, really am excited at the idea of us having affordable housing for people who work in Ypsilanti and want to have a walkable lifestyle and walk to work. This is something that we're really unique. We have this amazing park connecting to areas, to business centers. And really the cross street area is also a business center. We really have a walkable community, and to be able to cultivate affordable places that are beautiful also. That is a beautiful place where this development could happen, and it's your neighborhood. And it's absolutely gorgeous. I'm excited and hopeful that we can move about this in a thoughtful way for the existing residents, but also in a hopeful way for the future residents that will grow that neighborhood and make a beautiful place for people. Wow, that was a lot. Like,
Starting.
no time limit on introductions. Awesome. All right. Hi everyone, Annie Somerville. I am half of your city council reps for Ward 3. I live in Depot Town. I've been in Ypsilanti for almost 10 years. I've been on council for almost 3. I am excited to be part of this ad hoc committee and be the interested council person for Ward 3, part of this group. I care a lot about attainable housing, affordable housing, keeping it affordable long-term, and the sustainability of that. I also care a lot about climate change and the current climate crisis that we're going to be facing for the rest of our lives, as well as preparing Ypsilanti to make sure that people who are from here, live here, don't get pushed out when climate refugees come to Michigan. I feel like we have a lot at stake for planning in the city for the next 10 to 15 years to make sure we're prepared for that. And I just can't really highlight enough how much I care about making sure that the properties on this at this development stay long-term attainable and affordable for people who are from Ypsilanti.
I'm Jack Lark. I have lived in Ypsi for a total of 6 years, currently in Ward 1 amidst the water line construction.
Oh, man.
Right on here. And I am fairly new to this whole process. So when it comes to the formalities of this process, I'm just gonna kind of roll with the punches and add my ideas in when I see fit. And
Hi, I'm Amanda Smith. You've already heard me talk too much today, probably, so I'll try to keep it short. But essentially, most of my community involvement to date has been related to the schools, and that's because I believe the schools are connected to everything else that we do and building community. And a big piece of that, I spent a lot of time thinking about equity, and connected to that is now we're looking at one of the most valuable pieces of property in our city that's walkable to both downtown and Depot Town, in a beautiful place, in a great neighborhood with wonderful neighbors that will hopefully welcome new people into their space. Might now have more people there, and they might now have the ability to welcome, as Annie said, people that can live there long-term, who work here, who can have a space that's affordable, and are part of our community. So for me, it's all about community building and continuing to keep Ypsi as magical as it has been for me in my experience here so far, and for everybody else, making sure we do that in a way that's not causing more divides that are so starkly highlighted in Michigan's education system. I want to see that those types of things fade more and more equitable opportunities arise.
My name's Amber Fellows, so I have lived in the community 19 years, I guess almost 20 years now. And I have been around kind of city government processes maybe the last 6-ish years. And kind of learning a lot more about all of this works. Of course, there's a lot of things to learn. It's kind of never ending. But I was involved with the coalition group that wanted the community benefits ordinance to happen. I'm invested in seeing this process go through well, and hopefully, you know, as part of our recommendations, also recommend that the ordinance is renewed. I work in the social services field right now. I'm a program director for a senior services program, and I've worked with youth, and primarily I've worked in housing, specifically affordable housing and permanent housing, supportive housing, things like that. So my number one is definitely housing affordability and long-term affordability. Because I've been here a long time, I have seen the city go through changes. And so I'm really touched by people's testimony about the magicalness and the loveliness. And I've definitely felt that too. But I have, you know, maybe some grievances too, as far as like, there's been a lot of changes as far as gentrification goes. And, you know, I felt like the city hasn't done very much to address that. And that's why I care very specifically about development, and I care about learning from the past. So that's what my intentions here in this body is, first to see it go well, but second is to kind of take those lessons from the past and try to apply it to this process. Specifically, a couple of things like Cross Street Village comes to mind, Thompson Block comes to mind. So I really want to make sure that we kind of, I don't know if everybody's gonna agree with this, but in my mind, I'm like, there's the things that we can work out with the developer and negotiate. And then there's the negotiations with the city. And so, you know, like a low level one would be like, please renew this community benefits ordinance. It's effective and there's buy-in from the public and it's working. That's if it does work and it goes well. But the other thing is like, maybe we can get the city to also enact a you know, ban on short-term rentals. That's been an issue that's come up a lot, and Thompson Block is all Airbnbs now, so that's a potential risk for any kind of development. And you know, Ann Arbor already has that. They grandfathered in all their existing Airbnbs, but there's no longer, as far as I know, they have a ban on further ones. So I think we should have something like that. Also, something like actual clawbacks in our agreement. So, you know, if we negotiate the ability to preserve long-term affordability for some reason, there has to be consequences if it doesn't actually happen. So a clawback so we can get the property back, or I don't know how this will exactly work, but I'm just saying like we need actual accountability structures in place so it doesn't just happen like another Cross Street Village or Thompson Block or whatever. And I agree with Amanda that this is just a high value piece of land, and just to keep that in the center of my mind as we're going through this. Right by Depottown and downtown, it's kind of perfect. So I think, you know, to honor the space, honor the people that live there currently, and, you know, honor like the, you know, the people that live here and obviously care about maintaining basically like the residents that exist here to continue being there. So those are the things that I want to bring to the table. I really appreciate just hearing from everybody so far. Thank you.
But if I give a 2 minute before I give it over to Shannon to kind of close out, just so, because I don't think everyone here knows who I am. I think most people I've met, at least peripherally, but I'm Joe Myers. I'm the Director of Economic Development, and my focus in economic development is housing. I think that the city of Ypsilanti has such a limited housing stock. Our values have gone up. If you actually look at the data, our housing values have went up almost 100% over the last 6 years. And that's insane. Most people have been priced out of the city, which is a huge, huge problem. The fact that we now have a higher property value, over the last year, our values have risen more than Ypsilanti Township, and I never thought that was actually going to happen. So right now, the average home sale price in Ypsilanti is $255,000. In Ypsilanti Township, it's 230, roughly. Those numbers just came out. And we have to figure out a way to have common sense solutions to try to get more attainable and affordable homes in the city. And it's not an easy thing. The state has stepped in our way almost every single way to enact any sort of reasonable change. And so it is my goal to try to listen to the community here. I've learned a lot from the other community benefits group on what their wants are and how to do it. And I think it's really fascinating to have two polar opposite projects. One being a developer owned light tech pilot project, then going to a for sale model where there will be, it's a completely different thing. And I think it actually helps to focus where the community is on either one of these developments. So typically economic development directors throughout the state try to increase the taxable value of the communities they live in, which I love to see. However, if we don't have the ability to have our residents live in our community, the people who work here, live here, the people who live here, stay here, you know, that's a huge problem, and we're not Ypsi without our residents. So that's my biggest concern.
I think you've heard a little bit about me, but I'll tell you, I'm very passionate about housing. I've been in housing for 25 years. You've heard mainly about my large projects, all of which are very sustainable after generations and award-winning. But beyond that, I've worked with over 20 different cities in Michigan to develop neighborhood stabilization and long-term housing plans. I advocate both at the federal level as well as at the state level. And I just want to give you some data on, you know, how we looked at this development in community, and, you know, how all of your ideas, your creative input is important in your community, and, you know, where you need to look at that. You know, we have specific components in this that are designed to, number one, see this project succeed. Number two, make sure there's no unintended consequences in success. In the next couple of weeks, you're going to hear a lot on housing, and it's really hard being in the private sector to understand all the pieces that are moving forward. We are, you know, at the epitome of a housing crisis, and it is the exact opposite of the bubble. I worked, you know, diligently through Dodd-Frank in the crash, working with cities and plans. Michigan is about to announce a statewide housing plan in the next 2 weeks. We are 75,000 units short of housing. In communities I'm working with across the state, we're seeing rental rates up 40%. We're seeing most of the subsidized housing moving to market rate housing. We're seeing employers not able to expand because there's not housing. And right now, nationwide, 1 out of every 7 homes is being purchased by Wall Street. So we really need to think, you know, from a different perspective through a housing lens. And second to that, the cost is rising on a daily basis. You know, number one, we are designing homes to be more efficient, to be more climate adaptive. Just alone impact fees to develop a house range between $80,000 and $90,000 a unit. That's on the National Association of Home Builders website. Beyond that, when we look at stormwater and we look at infrastructure, those are all raising costs. Just alone for us, when we went to rebid our engineering for infrastructure, this is in construction. From 5 months ago, the cost is up $700,000. So, you know, we are dealing with cities and state agencies who are seeking long-term solutions. The other thing is we talk about equity. The biggest problem right now, as you'll see from fair housing reports, is the access to creating generational wealth. The largest proponent of folks that are looking to move into purchasing a home is the millennials. And right now they're being overbid. They're competing with folks that have cash. They're competing with the investor and speculative markets. And it's very important, from a talent and place and certainly economic development standpoint, that in the state of Michigan, we retain our youth. And we are aging fairly quickly. I always say for Ipsy, it's the youngest city I've ever seen. I haven't run the stats, but we look at mobility and demographics, because as you look at housing through the lens as, in community benefits, you probably are going to need to think about delivering different housing to different sectors. But over the last 5 years, you've had 3,000 new residents between the ages of 19 and 29. That is rare. We don't see that anywhere. Most of them are single, if not all. And 70% of those folks are in rental units right now. So emerging in that standpoint. And so in this development, what we are looking at is bringing in tools to make it affordable. If we could make it even more affordable, we would. But beyond the brownfield TIF, we're seeking an additional 2.5 in equity that's coming through resources through the American Rescue Plan. And that window's quickly shrinking because it's a limited opportunity to be able to design and deliver a community and bring in the equity we need to get those type of resources. Number one, when we look at affordability, we're utilizing long-term plans. Obviously, you've got different units from pilots to LIHTC to subsidized to different income spectrums. And we focused on this missing middle attainable spectrum. But we're looking at affordability where we have access to equity, where we will be open to other minority populations who have been disenfranchised from these type of opportunities, and where they can still build equity and generational wealth while still maintaining affordability. So those are all things that we've looked at through a careful lens and programmed along with a lot of, there's been HUD programs. My partner and I have done a lot of programs like this in the city of Detroit. This really is a hybrid. And so every component that we put in this has a thoughtful measure of making sure that we achieve those additional metrics. And I'm happy to provide any information about background in housing, about what's going on. I think you should expect in about 2 weeks for the statewide housing report to come out, just so you know. Since 2013, Michigan's housing values are up 84%.
2014, you said?
I'm sorry, 2013.
Oh.
2013. And in your city, the proponent of white population versus Black population, a third of your Black population own versus your white population.
70% white population. Yeah, so 70% of our white population own, 30% of our Black population own. We're hoping with a project like this, we can change that, at least in a small scale.
And certainly, we'd like to go and focus on income targeting as much as we can. When you talk about for sale, it's very different than rental, than LIHTC, than other affordability, because we look at debt to income. And so every person, it's not just how much you make or how little you make, it's how much debt you're bringing. So, depending on your student loans, depending on your car, depending on the credit cards you carry, is going to determine your affordability. And while we'd like to bring as many folks as we can in, we're going to have some type of limitations. And that's why long-term, understanding that and making sure that there's a variety of products across the spectrum from Section 8 housing to LIHTC housing to affordable home ownership is really, really key, because everything hits a certain point and some may not fill every single pot.
Can I ask a quick question? You mentioned the 3,000 new residents between the ages of 19 and 29. Did you say it was just over the past 5 years or something?
Yes. And remember, you can only grow as much as you have housing available. So it's really difficult because, and I understand, we have a beautiful historic community. And bringing in housing and looking at traffic, that's a lot to ask, but we have to make considerations for housing humans and having strategy, because there's no growth opportunity without housing expansion.
Just to be clear, we've had 4 houses built in the last 12 years. Total.
Wasn't the last development Penn Park? or Penn
Peninsula,
Place?
Peninsula Place was the last large scale, and that was 2004 or 5.
Okay.
I also want to, give another proponent, because we're really focused on the health and human service side of this, but bringing in residents within walkability to your downtown, especially when you have a night and day population, is the biggest economic feeder for your small businesses. Especially right now, your younger generation, your millennials tend to spend a little bit more money. They're more apt to use local goods, local wares, go to the restaurants. So, making sure that feed and having day and night population is really critical to a downtown district.
The increase of the 19 to 29-year-olds, I'm just like, that's probably displaced U of M students. Like, that's probably it.
So-
But it's actually IRS, so they're living here with an address and filing their taxes from that.
So it's actually, so what we've learned, just based on some very anecdotal information on deed pulling, it's not actually the students as much as it is the U of M employees. The younger U of M employees are filling up our city faster than anything.
And ultimately, when you look at housing from that specific demographic, you just want to make sure you have the product type to meet the different demographics, both from the social service side to the community side. So folks obviously, and many times move through different housing types in stages of their life, and depending on how they form households.
I just have a comment. I wonder if maybe, I don't know what everybody's thinking, but it seems like a lot of us were talking about affordability. So I wonder if we could pull out some of the comments from the last meeting. One idea that I had after the last meeting that I wanted to put out there was maybe trying to work out some sort of like I don't know what you call it, like offer window where current residents would have like first dibs to put in offers on like 75% of the properties on the development. So it was just one idea I had that I thought.
What did you call it? A what?
I don't know what the best name to call this would be, but I guess the idea is for like a 6-month window. Ypsilanti current Ypsilanti residents, I don't know, maybe renters would have like a priority window where they could place offers on the properties, like 75, at least 75% of the properties.
Kind of like a reminder first.
Kind of, yeah.
So I have a Zoom with the Fair Housing Center of Michigan on Wednesday of next week. We're discussing what we legally can do for this development, but it was mainly set up for the Clark Road development to try to figure out how we can get city residents into these. What we don't want to do is violate any Fair Housing Act rules. There are less rules because we're not hopefully taking direct federal funds like home for this, but we want to make sure that whatever we do is legal. And so we will find out exactly what we can do, because who would challenge us is the Fair Housing Center of Michigan.
Will the city get sued or the?
It depends on who is doing what. So we don't want anyone sued. We want to make sure everything's legal.
Well, I think the set, like, not doing 100% of it would probably be fine.
I think we just need to work through that. There's probably a creative way that we can offer opportunities. As Joe said, there, we do have to make everything available to all because there will be fair housing. Right now, this is going to be in demand. No, there's no new housing in the market right now, really under 400,000. 3 at the very least. So we just have to, we'll work through, as Joe said, one of the components we were able to, determine is we can offer more down payment assistance for residents or for city employees as needed. There is likely a way to be creative and make sure that we meet those requirements. Let us just make sure we do our due diligence and, make sure that we can get creative on how that would look.
Is it possible for me to be at that meeting?
I think there's gonna be multiple meetings, but probably.
Okay.
Let me,
I would like to be there.
Kristen and Pam,
As a city
I,
council person, not as an member.
no, but let me just double check. Like, I'll see if they don't mind. But sometimes they might, but I don't think they will.
And Joe, I may need to be there because I think it's very possible if we're not multi-listed at the time and we're not publicly posting everything, and we don't have to, that we have, some type of internal event. I think that there's a way that we could do that wouldn't violate it. We just have to make sure that we work through and we're clear on what that structure is.
Yeah, okay. I guess, in my head, I'm just like some sort of window. It doesn't necessarily need to be 6 months, but I would like it to be renter focused, current resident focused. Or people who were pushed out of the city in the last 2 years that they can verify that they lived here prior to that.
First time home buyer residents,
What was that?
like first time home buyer residents also like that.
Well, I guess if you're first time home buyer, you'd be a renter currently, right?
Right, yes.
Yeah.
Although not necessarily with all renters. Would be first time buyers. The other, I don't know the legal abilities here, but I was also curious about what is possible in terms of avoiding in the long term or short term, or if this is but having one person or one landlord purchase many units and have this become like a landlord monopoly on the space.
I'm going to answer that and let Joe answer. Obviously within the site condominium bylaws, we can write restrictions, but we're limited to enforcing city code and laws. On those deed restrictions as part of the program guidelines, we can limit that to home ownership if need be. It's something we need to talk about with the DRA too. So once again, there's some limitations, but also we've got to go back to city code and ordinance as well. As a developer, we're fine with it being, under home ownership. And once again, we'll see what the legal parameters are for stating requirements, but I would also push back on city ordinance as well, because we can't trump that, and even in the site kind of.
Well, then that's my other question, are there things that we should be asking the city to partner on to help make sure that this continues to be affordable homes that people can own long-term?
So that's something we're gonna actually, we want this committee to discuss. We've talked about it in all of our processes that we've had, but really we want to get to the heat of what this committee wants as far as, potential deed restrictions, so long as they're legal. We all have heard of the terrible deed restrictions back in the, late 19th, early 20th century that are awful, but there are certain deed restrictions we can put in there. You can't stop somebody from buying it and renting it, I don't think, if it's like a long-term rental. But our goal isn't to sell this to one landlord. And I think we have the ability to not sell, we could sell to, yes, sorry. Short answer to your question is yes, we can do that, I think.
I think we can limit rental.
Yeah.
In the site condo guidelines, once again, depending if there's nothing in city ordinance that trusts it just to answer. And I go back and advise you when we start to talk about affordability, you need different types of affordability. You know, when you're getting a pilot for a LIHTC, that's a 50-year affordability. We do want to preserve it, but at the same time, we want those disenfranchised folks to be able to have some generational wealth building. So we're trying to do something to really balance that. And when you look at a lot of the missing middle programs, the HUD programs, a lot of the urban programs that were done, and even in Mishta and the 4%, which is low income housing tax credit, it's 15 years. When you look at 99 years, it's great when you're servicing a lot of the social needs, a lot of the, vulnerable citizens. So, there's that balance of how much of this needs to be wealth building for folks that haven't had access and how much of this is preserved. And that's why we thought the sweet spot was 15 years.
What is the, I'm sorry, I'm just not understanding the 15-year component.
That's the affordability that we've been looking at. We haven't finalized it yet.
And that's what this committee will help make some of these things like.
Like the condominium association, which restricts the increase in price for that period of time, is that?
No, we're trying not to restrict the increase in price because we want it to be generational wealth building, but it will happen somewhat naturally because each unit that has an affordable component will be deed restricted. And that deed restriction is just like a low income housing product. If anyone ever sells, they have to go through an admin process to have that deed removed. The city and the county would have to approve a new buyer and they would have to qualify in that income component. And we're creating a revolving loan fund that would circulate down payment for new people that come in through sources that we're talking about to qualify for that. So it's a new system that we're working through.
I understand the down payment assistance seems like a great idea. But I also question if there's anything that can be done with supporting homeowners through their homeownership. Because I would hate for somebody to get into a home and not be able to afford to stay there and then be undercut by a landlord and that who now owns his house and can turn it into whatever.
Well, we'll likely not have landlords.
Right, but
In order to qualify through the program guidelines, they'll have to go through a homeownership counseling program that requires to be recertified. So we'll base it, Mishta, there's a lot of these type of homeownership programs that exist and down payment assistance to exist. We'd be working with community development lenders who put the permanent mortgage on this. The requirements for debt to income are pretty conservative. They have to go through classes to get the down payment assistance and get recertified. That has to be through a certified counselor, usually that's Mishta or HUD certified. Whether we're still determining who that will be, whether that's a Habitat or Washtenaw County. These are fairly normal programs that run in these type of home ownership programs. But they will have access to this. Part of this is about home maintenance. It's about, financial stability. It's about understanding their mortgage. All of that's part of the classes that they have to take to qualify for the down payment assistance.
Can I add to that real quick, Annie? I'm sorry. The other thing that's important on this is to the down payment assistance will help lower the mortgage price to keep it at a more affordable rate. And so what my goal is, and this is one thing that, when this is approved, or if it's approved, we're gonna be working with the Ann Arbor Housing Commission to actually find voucher holders who can convert their voucher into a down payment, into the actual mortgage payment. So if you have a voucher, you can convert it into a mortgage. And so we have to work with the Ann Arbor Housing Commission, who holds all the vouchers for Washtenaw County, to try to find those buyers that can actually do that, because those are really awesome programs. And it's really hard to find a program that can actually go through, because there's usually a 6-month lead time, but luckily we have a year or two if this development goes through.
And just to further explain, obviously, the mortgage, we are working with community development lenders who have very aggressive programs that they're bringing specifically to this project, as well as additional down payment assistance that they're gonna put in combination with ours. They go through a pretty comprehensive process when you're talking about first-time home buyers to make sure that, you know, their first mortgage is secure. But beyond that, we subordinate. So we have control if anything happens with that property to work with that first lender on it, if anything does happen.
And then with the classes and all that, I would want to see that those are done in a way that's more equitable and that like that's a commitment. And anytime you're putting a commitment like that on somebody, it's a huge barrier to entry for certain populations. Like a great example of that is looking at our transit, where you have to go all the way to Ann Arbor if you want assistance on your bus fares. Like that is a egregious similar situation. So I would like to see that those things.
I think we can shop. One thing we want to make sure that it's mandatory that we have a VISTA and HUD approved counseling agency. There's a group, National Faith Communities, that does a lot of programming. This is just one I'm giving an example of. I mean, as far as I know, a lot of things have converted to virtual. And, you know, these are groups that are working in distressed communities. They're converting, you know, as Joe said, Section 8 folks, they're working in different programs. So they usually have a focus on equity and working with populations that, you know, really need assistance. Sometimes it's just even helping them repair credit, getting them ready to buy a home, making sure that they're educated properly. So we can provide you with a list of those folks to do a little due diligence.
And our goal is to work solely with local realtors that sell homes in Ypsilanti and who have buyers in Ypsilanti who actually, like one in particular, I'm not using one person's name, but she's one person who actually does a lot of the counseling sessions, which is Janice Townsend. She's somebody who understands the community, loves the community, has buyers in the community, and also brings those resources to the community in order to help. And so there's like a bunch of realtors that work in the city that we want to work with to make sure, because I agree with you 100%, Amanda. The barrier to entry is steep, but we also don't want to put people in homes for purchase where it's a 30-year commitment, and we want it to be long-term successful.
There's a couple of other proponents to understand with that as well. Just know that with the gap source, we're looking at a couple of different funds through the American Rescue Plan. There'll likely be some, you know, overlay requirements from those sources on this as well. So we're going to have to meet funding requirements above and beyond to know that. And I think I will add too that, you know, there's a lot of different folks that are coming together to make this project possible and bringing the equity in that's allowing us to deliver this. But we're, you know, in conversation right now with the Ann Arbor Community Foundation, who is looking at partnering and providing a significant commitment to bridge all of these pieces as well. I believe this will be their first investment in a real estate project. So, and it's a pretty big, significant commitment. They're really focused on delivering missing middle workforce housing right now.
Just a small facilitation thing. I think Annie's had her hand up for a while, and maybe since we don't have a lot of time left, we can prioritize the committee to discuss what we've all learned. Thank you.
One quick comment, just based on the last like 2 minutes. I mean, is there a way to do this, like this early window? Do people need a realtor to help them through this process? Doesn't that cost extra money to involve a realtor? They get something out of it.
So
I mean,
it's a little early. We want to get through our guidelines and get through all of these. And what we'll do is we will work with realtors when needed. Sometimes it's best to send them right to the counseling agencies to get prepped, and oftentimes a lot of the counseling agencies have more tools. we will likely create a waiting list and a website, but we've got to work through some of the proponents of how we want to deliver and speak to which audiences. So we just want to make sure we have all of those plans underway before we move forward.
Realtors are paid by the seller, not the buyer. Flat out,
What about like fees associated with?
seller.
Okay.
But the seller's gonna. I mean, it ultimately goes to that. I mean, you're not gonna sell it for less money.
But I feel like the real estate fees have already been kind of calculated into the sale price.
At the end of the day, what it says here that a portion will be set aside for affordability housing. And I've heard a very good discussion on how we can protect that. What percentage are we looking at in terms of affordability housing?
50%.
50%. Now, the other half, which is not, is that just straight market value? Is there any protections for the city there? Or I guess that's something we can start to talk about. For instance, to prevent landlords coming in and doing mass buying it, have a limit of one house per person or something like that, where one person can't buy 5 or 6 houses, which is what Wall Street is doing right now. They're just coming in and buying it all, and seems to me a city ought to have some kind of protection.
Need to just re-verify that with the legal. And once again, have a conversation with the city. I believe we can put that everything needs to be, 100% homestead in the bylaws for all of the units. That is something we'll verify.
What is the goal?
Because in the end, you can't have one development where some of the houses are at one price and the other houses are twice that price.
They're all the same price.
Okay, well,
What's gonna happen is, and see, I'm getting in the weeds, so I'm trying not to deter us. The units that are affordable will be bought down. The mortgage, the sale price is the same for all of the units. And by the way, all of the units are at an attainable level, so we can deliver that all under 200,000. The folks that come in and qualify will get down payment assistance based on their area median income that buys down their mortgage. So that's what the down payment assistance is. We'll pay for their closing costs, the rest will buy down the mortgage.
and then for 15 years, that will still be in effect.
That's what we are proposing right now. That's generally what you see for HUD or Fannie Mae standards and affordable housing programs for sale. What has been the most successful component where people still can build wealth, they get a little bit of equity, but it preserves the unit for as long term as possible.
Well, it just seems to me that one of the aims of this committee would be not only the affordability part in terms of the down payment assistance is the other part that's not affected by down payment assistance, to make sure that the whole property remains by Ypsilanti standards affordable. So I think it's one of our goals here. Just a comment.
We have 5 minutes left, so I just wanted to check in with where folks are at and probably want to spend the last 5 minutes.
I was just gonna say, I gained a lot from everybody going around talking about, their intentions and where they're at, because I think I understand now that, the main priority is housing affordability and maybe a secondary one with walkability, maybe environmental impact. So that's gonna help me for the other meetings. So I feel solid there. I don't know if I feel like we have specific things to talk about tonight, but I'm also open to extending if others do want to do that. Yeah, I just had a comment just to have it in the minutes that I do echo your concerns, Amanda, just about like potential disparate impact of certain things, the debt to income ratio
concern and the counseling and all of that could have potential disparate impacts, which just means that we can't predict it, but it actually turns out this is actually restrictive to certain demographics of people. And even if the intention is good. Deep restrictions also historically have had really negative disparate impacts. I don't know if I can see there being like positive deep restrictions, so I just have to do more research on that. I'm just making a note of it that we might not know what happens, like unintended consequences could happen. And then I'm just like more broadly curious because it seems like the condominium association structure is what's going to be the thing that is the tool that's being used to possibly limit like income property owners coming in. I'm just wondering because there are homeowner cooperatives that are right outside our county that seems similar to this development. And like, why not like a cooperative association instead of a condominium one? Because that would certainly preserve affordability for a much longer period as well. And yeah, and I understand that's not like in the current plan or anything, but I'm more just thinking about like there's a lot of talk about things that sound really cool and working with better realtors or better counseling agencies or whatever. But I think what I prefer to see is like not just leaving it up to relationships and like promises, and rather having things in contract and like actually legal. So like the thing that Annie was bringing up, we do have examples of time periods in which one group is prioritized, like right of first refusal. That is example. So I know it's possible. So it'd be nice to be able to figure out how we can incorporate that. Sorry, that was a lot. But...
Yeah, I feel pretty good about where we're at tonight. It does seem like there's a lot of focus on affordability, which is cool because that's what I care about. I have more questions, but I'll just save for the next meetings. I do care a lot about this concept of like right of first refusal. I'm also interested if there's a way we can work out like if somebody who I don't know, chooses to sell, if the city could be the first right of refusal in either situation, whether it's the 50% that's not, or 50% that does have down payment assistance. Just personally, I think it'd be nice if we were able to buy back all the properties little by little and keep them affordable through the county's land bank or a community land trust. That doesn't exist yet, but it could exist. Maybe not a question that can be answered tonight.
It's 7:59.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I thank you, Annie and Amber. I just want to like echo the affordability and also the walkability and also like the safety element as really critical. I think it's a big influx of folks, and in the master plan we have a lot of language about walkability and safety for people living here, and I think that's a really critical thing to think through, especially I'm on I didn't mention in the introduction, I'm on the non-motorized committee, and there's a lot of like really thoughtful work going in right now to making the city a lot more bikeable and walkable and safe. And looks like we're at time.
Motion to extend 15 minutes. If anybody has any other thing to say.
Support. All in favor?
Aye. I'm good. I don't have anything else to say tonight. So
Okay.
I'll just leave it for others to talk.
I would like, I would be willing to make, because it seems to me in situations like this, you get into you add more, but the amount of information you're adding more has already probably been talked about. So we could spend another 4 or 5 hours here, right, going over a lot of the same things. I think the reason that they have 2-hour limits is to force people to discipline themselves to get out the important information and move things along. So obviously I'm outvoted here, so we can stay it longer, but I'm not, I just think that I haven't heard anything remarkably new in the last 15 minutes. I've heard a lot of the same things, a lot of great ideas, and you've enlightened me on a lot of things that you can do. And I just question, do we have a goal in mind for the next 15 minutes that we can get into something that we haven't talked about that's important? I don't know anything.
I just didn't want anybody to feel cut off, and I personally know that I tend to monopolize conversations, and there's 2 people at the table who have said less, so I'd like to give them an opportunity to where they'd like to.
As I said, I'm not the deciding vote, so that's fine.
Not that you have to. I just don't-
I don't know that.
Okay.
I just want to ask a quick question. Can you just recap for me how the taxes work just on these properties once they're purchased? As far as the property taxes and how those roll out to the buyers? And they don't, yeah. Certain number of years, et cetera.
So the taxes are the same for the buyers. What happens is it's the tax capture. We're monetizing the brownfield, which would be the capture of the tax increment financing to put back into the project. So what are we at? 7? How many years are we at?
10 to 14, depending.
So on the 10 to 14, year after year, the taxes are captured. What we do is we loan against that to fill the gap. And it's repaid with the taxes that are collected. Once that's paid off, then obviously it's on a normal taxing cycle.
I mean,
No, I was just, for long-term affordability for people, that's high on my list of things to think about. You know, for setting people up for success and or failure when they get a huge reality check.
Well, that's why the taxes aren't going to change, period.
All right,
Instead of going up slightly, cost of living every year.
got it. Thank you.
Jeff, do you have anything?
We just feel targeted because we're in that category of millennials that are renters.
Looking at you two. First 2 residents.
Yeah, probably not. I like my apartment.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'm just carrying on.
Though, like, I teach in social work, the teacher in me is like wanting to be like, well, I kind of feel overwhelmed, and I think that maybe like, you know, some nice homework, to sort of like actually think about, like, there's a lot of information to be had, and to maybe think about all of it and sort of where certain priorities are, and to maybe come with those to the next meeting to think about, you know, maybe these areas or maybe more specific questions about that we have related to those areas. I mean, does that seem like, I mean, we're gonna get a board with Post-its? That would be cool. So maybe the next meeting, thinking ahead, we're going to like, I don't know, brainstorm a little bit more seriously. Is that correct? Or
It's kind of what I'm.
That's your motion to adjourn.
sure. Unless there's other, I don't wanna, yeah, if there's other comments or.
I second that. That was a motion, right?
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
So hard.
I just want to say it's been